Welcome to Mindset and Stone podcasts, where we dive deep into the most compelling books on the shelf. Join hosts Dave and Poppy as they uncover the stories, themes, and ideas that shape our understanding and inspire curiosity. Get ready to explore the big ideas that leave a lasting impact. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Mindset and Stone podcast, where we take a deep dive into the foundational ideas that shape our lives and, crucially, the long-term success of our relationships.
Today, we're wrestling with what is, I think, arguably the biggest mystery of adult partnership. What happens to love after the initial euphoria fades?
Right, because we're constantly bombarded with advice, the endless listicles, the 101 tips for a better marriage. But so often, those methods feel like a performative chore, or they simply fail to resonate with our partner.
Exactly. And that's the most frustrating part. You feel like you're putting in the effort, you're trying harder, you're giving more, but the other person just doesn't seem to register it.
They still feel emotionally disconnected, or even worse, unloved. And when that happens, the frustration it's paralyzing. You get to a point where you just stop trying because the investment yields no return. It feels hopeless.
The problem, and this is what we've seen distilled across decades of counseling, is not a lack of effort. It's a lack of effective communication. The fundamental truth we so often overlook is that people speak different love languages. We're talking about emotional linguistics here.
Think of it this way. If you moved to France and you exclusively spoke your native English, you could survive. You could gesture, draw pictures, and use broken phrases. You communicate, but it's awkward, it's stunted, and it's profoundly limited.
You'd never achieve true intimacy. Not with the culture, and definitely not with the people.
And emotional language works identically. We instinctively speak our native emotional tongue the way we naturally feel loved, and we just assume our partner hears and understands us.
When they respond with confusion or silence, or maybe they don't respond at all, we feel deeply misunderstood. We feel rejected even.
And this brings us to the central, most powerful concept in our source material today, the emotional love tank.
The premise is that inside every adult, just like every child, is this vital emotional tank that demands to be filled with love. This is a primary fundamental human need, as critical as the need for, security or nourishment.
When that tank runs on empty, the consequences are disastrous, both for the individual and for the partnership.
An empty tank triggers withdrawal, harsh words, chronic criticism, and this deep-seated resentment. We see this with children all the time. A child with an empty love tank misbehaves because they're searching, in a really misguided way, for love and attention.
That emotional need doesn't mature out of existence. It just changes its expression in adulthood. It becomes more subtle, more passive-aggressive sometimes.
Conversely, a full tank provides this massive climate of security. It creates the emotional buffer that you need to absorb life's inevitable stressors, to handle conflict without resorting to condemnation, and to facilitate mutual growth.
It's the prerequisite for intimacy. Without it, you're basically trying to build a castle on sand.
Our mission today is to provide you, the listener, with the definitive shortcut. We are not just listing the 5 languages, we're unpacking the practical steps, the critical nuances, the dialects. You need to start speaking your partner's native emotional tongue with fluency.
The goal here is making sure that long-term security and joy are not accidents, but intentional achievements.
Okay, so let's unpack this by starting where the entire framework began, with a man in crisis. We'll call him the man in seat 5A, flying between Buffalo and Dallas.
He had been married 3 times, and his question to the counselor was so simple, yet so profound. What happens to the love after you get married?
And his 3 failed marriages, they really illustrate this destructive cycle of romantic obsession giving way to reality. His second marriage, which was a 6-month whirlwind, exemplified the danger of initial excitement.
Right. That intense infatuation phase provided the illusion of perfect compatibility and intimacy. You feel like you've known this person forever.
But the moment they moved in together and had to deal with the mundane reality, the bills, the dishes, the different expectations about chores, the emotional foundation just wasn't there.
It wasn't built on knowing and serving each other. It was built on mutual euphoria. So when reality hit, it was a battle right from the start.
Then you consider his first marriage. It was stable for several years, but then the baby arrived. And this is a crucial point where attention fundamentally shifts in a relationship.
He confessed to feeling like he suddenly no longer mattered, like he was sidelined by the 24-hour demands of parenthood.
And when he voiced this deep emotional neglect, his wife, who was of course exhausted, simply dismissed him. She said he was crazy and didn't understand the stress she was under.
They weren't just arguing over diaper changes, they were arguing over priority. His complaint was about his empty love tank, and her defense was about her physical exhaustion.
And because they weren't speaking the same emotional language, they both felt completely unappreciated. And the relationship just drifted until, as he described it, there was nothing left but deadness.
And the third marriage was maybe the most confusing to him. He was a positive, appreciative person, and his wife initially was too.
But a few months after the vows, she became, in his words, totally negative. She started criticizing petty things, the garbage not being taken out, his choice of clothes, and then eventually she started attacking his character.
And here's the kicker. He continued to express love as he always had. He was telling her she was beautiful, buying her gifts, but those expressions, which totally worked during the dating phase, suddenly didn't matter anymore.
The criticisms kept coming. He was speaking a language she didn't understand, and she was responding from a place of deep, uncommunicated emotional need.
This brings us to the core illusion we all fall for. The in-love experience itself. That feeling is intoxicating. It's euphoric, emotionally consuming, and profoundly obsessive.
Absolutely. When you're in it, you truly believe your partner, let's call her Jen, is flawless, even though anyone observing from the outside can clearly see Ryan's issues, like his chronic inability to hold a steady job.
That euphoria convinces us of two things at the same time. First, that we've achieved total intimacy, and second, that this feeling is permanent, that the intensity will last forever.
But unfortunately, the idea of the eternality of the in-love experience is fiction, not fact. And our sources point to psychologist Dr. Dorothy Tenov's landmark research, which concluded that the average romantic obsession, or limerence, has a highly predictable, biologically programmed shelf life. About 2 years on average.
Wait, so you're saying every amazing, passionate first year is essentially just a biological trick? What if someone feels like their passion lasted longer, maybe 3 or 4 years? How do we distinguish true intimacy from this biological obsession?
That's a great question, and it addresses the skepticism a lot of people feel. I think the difference is exhaustion. The in-love experience is emotionally draining precisely because it is obsessive. It forces you to focus all your energy on the beloved. True intimacy, which is built on choice, is restful and supportive. It doesn't drain your personal resources, it replenishes them. The 2-year mark is just the average point when that unsustainable energy finally collapses under its own weight.
So this obsession is a natural mechanism, a powerful, almost chemical force that's designed to get us to commit, to sort of sign the contract before our rational minds fully engage with the reality of the person we've chosen.
Precisely. But once you descend from that emotional high, once reality intrudes, and it always does, bringing with it the daily stress of bills, routine, compromise, that's when the transition occurs.
And those endearing little quirks, the ones you found so adorable during the dating phase, they suddenly become intensely annoying habits.
And this is where true love begins. We can't really take credit for the kind and generous things we do while we're essentially under the influence of the obsession. Those actions are driven by instinct.
So when that biological force fades, the couple faces a critical junction: misery, eventual divorce, or the choice to expend conscious effort in an act of will for the other person's benefit.
This sustained, intentional action, this deliberate choice to be kind and generous, is what true, mature love is fundamentally built upon. The effort itself becomes a statement of enduring commitment.
And the key to making that massive investment of effort actually count is to stop guessing and start speaking the language that actually fills their tank.
So let's dive into the first 2 of the 5 love languages, starting with the immense power of the spoken word.
Okay. Love language number 1 is words of affirmation.
This is the intentional use of verbal compliments, heartfelt appreciation, and specific encouragement to communicate your love. The beauty of this language is its simplicity. These statements don't need to be grand pronouncements. They should be simple and straightforward.
For example, instead of a vague, "You're a good spouse," you should try something more targeted. "You look so sharp in that suit. I love how you put that outfit together." Or, "I really appreciate that you took the time to balance the budget this month."
Specificity is the difference between a throwaway comment and a genuine compliment that really lands.
The moment you start speaking this language, you actively change the emotional climate of the marriage. But it's vital to recognize the dialects here, as they really dictate the effectiveness of your words.
One of the most powerful dialects is encouraging words. This means inspiring courage in areas where your spouse feels insecure or has some kind of untapped potential. It's about building them up where they might feel vulnerable.
Right, like in the story of Keith and Allison.
Exactly. Allison loved to write, but years ago, she had received a really painful rejection and basically just shelved her talent.
Keith, whose love language was not words, recognized her interest, read some of her new work, and he enthusiastically affirmed her writing abilities. He didn't just say, "That's nice."
No, he said, Allison, you're a really good writer. Your prose is clear and your ideas are compelling. You absolutely have to submit this.
And those targeted words inspired her to overcome that fear of failure, which led her to take all the necessary arduous steps, the revisions, the research, the resubmissions, which eventually resulted in a book contract.
And here is the absolutely crucial nuance, and this is so often missed by well-meaning partners. Encouraging words must support an interest they already have.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
A huge one. If you try to use encouragement to pressure them into doing something you want, say, finding a more lucrative job or spending less time on their hobby, your words will not land as love.
They'll be perceived as criticism.
Criticism, judgment, or guilt-inducing pressure. You're essentially expressing rejection of who they are right now.
That makes perfect sense. If I feel criticized for my current efforts, no amount of positive phrasing is going to mask that underlying rejection.
Precisely. The second key dialect is kind words, which focuses heavily on the delivery, the tone, and the manner. You have the right to share pain and anger, but it must be done in a loving way.
The distinction is vital, saying, "I felt disappointed and hurt that you didn't offer to help me with the yard work this evening," when it's delivered with gentle directness and focused eye contact. That's an expression of love.
Because you are choosing intimacy through self-revelation. You're inviting them into your emotional reality.
But say those exact same words in a loud, harsh, exasperated voice dripping with sarcasm, and they are immediately heard as condemnation, as judgment, or a generalized attack on their character.
The content of the words matters so much less than the music of the voice.
This is also where forgiveness plays a role, right? If a conflict arises, true love doesn't keep a historical ledger of wrongs.
No, it can't. If your spouse confesses a mistake or a failure and asks for forgiveness, you choose to grant mercy. Bringing up yesterday's failures today is just emotional pollution. It contaminates a potentially wonderful present with the toxic residue of the past.
And finally, we have the dialect of humble words. Love makes requests, not demands.
This is huge. When you issue a demand, I demand you clean up this mess, you automatically turn the marriage into a parent-child relationship. That demand affirms neither their worth nor their status as your equal partner.
A humble request like, "I know you're busy, but would you consider making that amazing pasta dish one of these nights?" is guidance that affirms their ability and their choice.
It empowers them to choose to respond to your need, and it's that voluntary choice that makes the act truly meaningful and filling for the love tank.
We saw this principle perfectly illustrated in the case of Dan the painter.
Yes. His wife was nagging him constantly, almost daily, for 9 months about the bedroom that needed painting. The atmosphere in their house was miserable and tense because of this one single repetitive criticism.
The counselor advised her to adopt an extreme course correction. Stop mentioning the paint entirely.
Instead, she was told to verbally compliment anything good Dan did, no matter how small or mundane, taking out the garbage without being asked, paying the bills on time, running to the store for a forgotten item.
She was highly skeptical. She thought this was ridiculous, like behavioral conditioning for a pet, but she followed the instructions.
And within 3 weeks, she returned to the counselor, completely surprised, saying, "It worked." The positive, genuine reinforcement, the focus on his strengths, was infinitely more motivating than 9 months of criticism had been.
Let's break down the psychology there. Why did positive reinforcement work where nagging failed so spectacularly?
Well, nagging is essentially saying, "You are failing me and you are not good enough." This empties the tank and leads to defensiveness or withdrawal. But the genuine compliments, they affirmed his worth and his ability.
Which allowed him to choose the action from a place of love, not coercion.
Exactly. It shifted the environment from punitive to appreciative. He painted the room, not because he was being bossed around, but because his emotional tank was being filled by affirmation, making him feel secure enough to choose to serve her.
That leads directly to our first two practical applications for you listening.
Practical takeaway 1. The Compliment a Day Challenge, words of affirmation. For 1 month, set a goal to give your spouse a different, genuine verbal compliment every single day. Force yourself to shift your internal focus away from their perceived flaws and toward their strengths and virtues. It recalibrates your entire mindset.
And practical takeaway 2. Master the art of the request. Humble words. Categorically eliminate criticisms and demands phrases like, why can't you ever, or can't we ever have, and replace them with humble, non-judgmental requests. For instance, replace why is the garage still a mess with do you think it might be possible for you to clear out the garage this weekend? The change in internal posture and external tone is transformative.
Now, if your partner is the kind of person who sees love expressed through presence, we move directly to love language number 2, quality time.
The definition here is deceptively simple, but incredibly hard to execute consistently, giving someone your undivided, focused attention.
And it is a massive difference from simple proximity.
We've all been guilty of this. Sitting on the couch watching TV together, scrolling through a tablet while your spouse is trying to talk to you. That is physical proximity, not quality time. Your attention is fragmented, it's diluted, and they can feel it.
You can spot the behavioral contrast easily in public spaces. You think of couples on a first or second date. They are locked in conversation, maintaining intense eye contact, focused entirely on the person across the table.
They're performing quality time perfectly.
Then you look at the couple who has been married for 15 years. They are gazing around the restaurant, observing the ambiance, checking their phones under the table, or focused entirely on the food. They are physically together, but emotionally, they are miles apart.
If quality time is your spouse's primary language, they simply want you fully present with them.
This time it's expressed through 2 main dialects. The first, and often the most challenging, is quality conversation, which centers entirely on what you are hearing, not what you are saying. It demands sympathetic listening.
Sympathetic listening means asking questions to genuinely understand their thoughts, feelings, and desires without immediately jumping in with your defense, your own experiences, or your quick-fix solutions.
The cautionary tale of Patrick the advisor illustrates this failure perfectly. Patrick's wife reached out to a counselor after feeling disconnected for years.
And whenever she came home and told him about a struggle she had at work, a conflict with a client, a frustration with her boss, he immediately tried to solve her problems. He'd list steps she should take or defenses she should deploy.
He was focused entirely on advising and speaking, completely missing the emotional plea. She wasn't asking for a solution. She was pleading for sympathy, for validation, for his focused attention, and a shared sense that he was with her in her pain.
He was too busy being the problem solver to realize he was failing to meet her basic human need for connection and emotional support. He filled his own need to feel useful, but he emptied her tank by dismissing her feelings in favor of technical fixes.
So how do you learn to listen sympathetically when your natural instinct might be to fix things? It takes immense discipline.
We have a mini how-to for this. First, maintain eye contact, which is the physical signal that prevents your mind from wandering and communicates full attention.
And most critically, refuse to interrupt. Studies show the average person listens only about 17 seconds before interjecting their own ideas, defenses, or experiences.
Your goal is not to defend yourself or set them straight. Your goal is purely to discover their thoughts and feelings. You have to hold your tongue until they finish expressing their entire thought.
The second dialect is quality activities, and this is not about the activity itself. The activity, whether it's gardening, going to the symphony, taking a weekend trip, or even just running errands together, it's incidental.
It is merely the vehicle that creates the essential sense of togetherness through focused time.
The magic happens when you are doing something together, and later you have the memory of that experience. We saw this with Mark and Andrea. Andrea's primary language was quality time, but Mark was a classic workaholic.
Right. He rationalized his long hours by saying he was doing it for us, for their financial future.
The counselor challenged Mark to make a list of activities Andrea had always wanted to do, spending a weekend hiking, going for long evening walks, or learning a new sport. Mark had to physically make the time, which meant sacrificing some individual pursuits or even some work hours.
And what he learned was profound. Quality time doesn't detract from your vocational or financial goals. It ensures that when you achieve those goals and get to the top of that career ladder, your spouse and children are actually with you, sharing the journey, not waiting for you somewhere below.
Quality activities build a vital memory bank. Those foggy morning strolls, the slightly painful ski trip, the shared laughter over burnt food. These are tangible, repeatable memories of love that sustain the marriage through the inevitable dry periods later on.
Okay, let's cement those listening and attention strategies for our listeners.
Practical takeaway 3. Implement focused attention rules. Quality time conversation. Make an agreement with yourself. Whenever your spouse speaks to you about their day or a feeling, you will put down all screens, maintain eye contact, and absolutely refuse to interrupt. Your commitment must be to understand their perspective before you offer any defense or piece of advice.
And practical takeaway 4. Practice self-revelation. Quality conversation. If sharing your inner world doesn't come naturally, you need a system. Carry a small notepad. 3 times a day, ask yourself the simple question: what emotions, small or large, have I felt in the last 3 hours?
Then share these thoughts and feelings, even small things like road rage, frustration at a poorly designed website, or excitement over a minor win with your spouse. Intimacy grows only when they are invited into your internal landscape.
Okay, so we need to pick up the pace a bit while ensuring we maintain the depth for the remaining 3 languages. Let's start with love language number 3, receiving gifts.
The core definition here is that the gift is a visible, tangible symbol of thought. It really doesn't matter if it costs money. It matters that you thought of them.
For a person whose language is gifts, the object itself is a physical manifestation of love. It confirms, you were on my mind.
The emotional value of visual symbols is tremendous. Think about items that hold deep sentiment. A wedding ring, a specific photograph, a family heirloom. These are not merely objects. They are containers for memory and emotional history.
We see this perfectly in the anecdote of Kelsey and Eric. Eric caught a baseball barehanded at a game and inscribed it with the date and the phrase, "second best thing to happen to me that day."
And that baseball, sitting in a display case, became Kelsey's most treasured possession. It wasn't about the leather and string. It was a priceless symbol of that shared, intense moment of connection and his public declaration of love for her.
Gifts don't have to be purchased. They can be found, like an interesting feather or stone you pick up on a walk because you know they like natural elements.
Or they can be made a simple, thoughtful handmade card or a crafted piece of art. The cost is secondary, unless, and this is important, the gift is grossly out of line with your financial reality.
Right, a millionaire giving only a $1 gift for a major anniversary might signal a lack of effort or value.
But the single most important gift, especially in moments of crisis or transition, is the gift of self or presence. Being physically present when your spouse needs you is the ultimate symbol of commitment and priority. Your body is the gift.
The story of Tony and Sonia is a stark example of the failure to give this gift. Sonia's love language was receiving gifts, but Tony failed her profoundly twice.
He prioritized a softball league game over being present for the birth of their child. And later he prioritized the same league over attending his mother-in-law's funeral.
For Sonia, his physical presence was the symbol of his love, his dedication, and his prioritization of their family over his hobby. When he removed that symbol, when he chose a game over a profound, life-altering moment, her sense of being loved just evaporated.
The neglect was crushing, far worse than forgetting a birthday.
This language can be learned, though, even if you are a naturally frugal person who resists spending money. You have to reframe the concept.
You're not spending money. You are investing in emotional security, which is the highest yielding blue chip stock in your life portfolio.
So how do you learn to be a better gift giver if you are, fundamentally unobservant?
Practical takeaway 5. Start a gift idea notebook, receiving gifts. This is a simple but revolutionary idea. Keep a small, dedicated notebook or a note on your phone. Every time your spouse says, "I really like that," or makes an aspirational comment like, "I wish I had a nice blanket for the couch," write it down immediately.
This completely solves the "I don't know what to get you" problem and ensures your gift giving is always intentional and relevant.
Okay, let's move immediately to love language number 4, acts of service.
Acts of service means doing things you know your spouse would like you to do. These are actions that require thought, planning, and dedicated effort.
Whether it's cleaning the condo, running specific errands, mowing the lawn, or helping with a stressful administrative task, it is practical assistance aimed at relieving pressure on your mate.
But again, motivation is everything. These acts must be performed willingly. If you're doing them out of fear, guilt, or simmering resentment, or if your spouse is using manipulation or coercion, it completely undermines the loving intent.
Love is always a choice and can never be forced. You must never feel like a doormat.
The story of Dave and Mary in the mill town perfectly illustrates how this language can go wrong, even when both partners value it.
Both had acts of service as their primary language, but they were arguing constantly because they spoke different dialects of service and had poor role models.
Dave stopped helping around the house immediately after marriage because his model was his father, who did absolutely nothing inside the house except occasionally cut the grass. He just thought that was a division of labor.
And Mary, whose tank was empty, began making loud demands and criticisms, trying to boss him around.
Their marriage was reborn only when they stopped the criticism and started making humble requests. They sat down and clarified the specific acts they wanted.
Dave's requests included having the beds made and supper started. Mary's requests included him washing the car and vacuuming the house.
When they agreed to perform these specific, mutually requested acts willingly, rather than trying to fulfill vague, assumed expectations, the cycle of resentment broke. They directed their loving energy exactly where the other partner needed it.
Which transformed chores into acts of relational kindness.
Practical takeaway 6. The prioritized request list, acts of service. To avoid the mistake of doing the wrong acts, ask your spouse to make a list of 5-10 specific things they would like you to do during the next month. Then ask them to prioritize it, with one being the most important. This is a crucial step. It directs your loving time and energy precisely toward the acts that will fill their tank the most efficiently.
Finally, we arrive at love language number 5, physical touch.
Physical touch is a profound and powerful communicator of emotional love, essential for deep security. This language encompasses all forms of touch. Non-sexual like holding hands, a meaningful embrace, a hand on the shoulder while passing, and, of course, sexual intimacy.
We instinctively recognize the power of touch in crisis. When someone has experienced a car accident, a sudden loss, or received terrible news, our immediate nonverbal reaction is often to embrace them.
That hug, that physical pressure, it speaks volumes. It says, I am here, you are not alone, and you are loved, even when events cannot be changed.
It's absolutely critical we address a very common misconception here, especially prevalent among men, typified by the story of Marcus. Many men believe physical touch is their primary love language simply because they experience high sexual desire.
But the sources explain that sexual desire for men is often physically based, driven by hormonal buildup and a physical need for release. This desire is often present regardless of the emotional climate of the relationship.
For women, however, sexual desire is fundamentally different. It is far more heavily influenced by emotional factors. If she feels loved, admired, appreciated, and cherished by her husband, if her emotional tank is truly full because he has spoken her language all week, she is much more likely to desire physical and sexual intimacy.
Without that emotional closeness, she often feels used or disconnected in the sexual context. It becomes a transaction that empties her tank rather than fills it.
The key insight here is that if both partners' emotional love tanks are being consistently filled by speaking their respective primary languages, the sexual aspect of the relationship will often take care of itself.
The majority of sexual problems in long-term marriage have little to do with physical technique or lack of passion, and everything to do with consistently failing to meet core emotional needs during the other 23 hours of the day.
So we've laid out the framework, the 5 fundamental languages. But the framework is just theory until it's tested in the crucible of real resentment. Can this concept survive when deep wounds exist?
This brings us to the ultimate test, the profound question asked by Anne.
Anne felt deep hurt, anger, and utter resentment toward her husband, Glenn, who constantly criticized her and adamantly refused marriage counseling. Her question was stark. Is it possible to love someone whom you hate?
She felt she had only 2 choices: remain miserable and eventually divorce, or stay and live with the profound emotional emptiness. The counselor offered a third path based on the principle of loving your enemy.
An experiment founded on the hypothesis that if Anne could consistently, unilaterally speak Glenn's primary love language, his emotional need would eventually be met, leading to a change in his behavior and eventual reciprocation.
This was an investment of unconditional love. Based on observation, they guessed Glenn's primary language was physical touch, with words of affirmation as a close secondary.
Anne's objective was massive. She wanted Glenn to stop criticizing, to start listening to her, and for her to eventually regain warm, positive feelings toward him.
Her action steps were incredibly radical. They demanded immense courage. First, she had to go home and state, not with sarcasm, but with genuine commitment, I've decided I want to be a better wife to you. I'm open to suggestions.
I mean, can you imagine that disarmed him immediately?
Second, for 1 full month, she was to focus her efforts exclusively on physical touch and words of affirmation, meaning deliberate, kind touches and genuine compliments.
And critically, she was instructed to stop all verbal complaints, instead writing them down in a private notebook to vent without contaminating the relationship.
She had to choose to express love through acts of will, even though she didn't feel any love or passion for him. She was choosing to do acts for his benefit and pleasure, accepting the significant risk that this might feel hypocritical or that he might not reciprocate immediately.
That's the unconditional investment. The initial commitment was for 6 months. The results, however, were much quicker.
She was instructed to ask for feedback after the first month. By the end of the second month, Glenn began to give her positive feedback about her efforts, noticing her increased kindness and affection.
When she received that first positive, unsolicited response, the first sign his tank was starting to register the input, she made her first humble request.
A request that aligned with her primary language, quality time.
Let's take a walk in Renolda Gardens this Saturday.
In the following months, because his love tank was being maintained, Glenn responded positively to almost all of her requests. He stopped the chronic criticism, started listening, and eventually their marriage was reborn.
It demonstrated that emotional love is not a feeling you passively wait for. It is an active, sustained choice that creates the necessary climate for positive feelings to return.
This leaves us with our final practical step, applicable whether you are dealing with minor disagreements or profound resentment. Practical takeaway 7, the 6-month unconditional investment. If you implement the correct language and your efforts are not immediately reciprocated, do not pull back. Set a determined goal to continue speaking your spouse's language consistently for 6 months to a year, regardless of their immediate response.
This proves your sincerity and keeps you on a positive, self-affirming path. If, ultimately, they choose to walk away from the relationship, they will be walking away from someone who is loving them unconditionally and correctly.
Okay, let's unpack this entire deep dive. We learned that the secret to lasting, mature love is not finding a perfect person or maintaining impossible euphoria, but understanding that the end of the in-love obsession is precisely where the intentional choice for real love begins.
And that intentional choice is channeled through one of 5 love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch.
Recognizing your spouse's native language is the fundamental difference between frustrating, soul-crushing miscommunication and genuine, secure, emotional connection.
I challenge you to take the first step today. Don't assume you know your partner's love language, because often the opposite is true. The most reliable indicator is their chronic complaint, because your complaints reveal your deepest desires.
If they frequently say, "We don't ever spend time together," that is a flashing light pointing toward quality time. If they say, "I wish you would just help me out around here," that points strongly to acts of service.
Listen to their criticism, and you will hear their plea for love.
The core insight is this. Emotional love is not a passive feeling that washes over you. It is a choice and a sustained action that requires effort and intention. You have the full ability to make that choice today and start filling that emotional tank.
You are significant, and you deserve a secure, fulfilling relationship where your efforts are recognized and reciprocated. Learning to speak this second language, the language of choice and effort, is the single best investment you can make.
It leads to a climate where conflicts can be resolved, and the true potential, both individually and as a couple, can be unleashed. Go forth and fill those love tanks.
We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a spark of inspiration. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and check back for more episodes as we dive into new worlds of thought, one book at a time. Until then, keep your mind set in stone and your curiosity open. This has been a Big L Riz Media podcast, where big ideas meet lasting impressions.